Ben Gertzel here. Welcome to episode 10 of this video series on the general theory of general intelligence. So in the last episode, I went a bit out there, sort of speculating about consciousness and quantum theory and so forth. It seemed time to relax and blow off some steam after so much mathematics and software. Now I'm going to get a bit more serious, and I want to talk about AGI ethics and the incredibly important and really deadly serious matter of like how do we get the AGI systems we build to be loving, beneficial, compassionate minds. I mean, I don't think there's any reason to assume an AGI system would on its own develop a negative attitude toward humans, but one can see how the wrong people creating AGIs toward their own selfish or even malevolent ends could certainly create AGIs that had negative and destructive attitudes toward humans. One can also see how an AGI mind could evolve into a state where it was relatively indifferent toward humans, right? And didn't necessarily hate humans, but considered us, on a par with an ant or a squirrel or a cub, just as a relatively primitive, uninteresting organization of matter, right? And we don't want either of those options, right? I mean, we don't want AGIs that are serving some human parties' narrow ends to the detriment of humanity as a whole. And we don't want AGIs that go off becoming super smart, doing interesting stuff, and don't give a crap about humans any more than we humans give a crap about ants or bacteria, right? We want to create AGIs that will fulfill their potential to massively improve human life. I mean, if we get it right, then AGI can, cure aging and death. It can create material abundance for human beings at scales that we can barely imagine just by 3D printing matter of all sorts. It can allow us to repair and improve our brains, to get rid of mental illness, to upgrade our ability to think and feel, to let us network our brains with those of other humans and commune with others in deep ways we can't imagine now, modify our bodies so we can fly around like angels, right? I mean, what a mind dramatically smarter than us and well disposed toward us could do would be incredibly positive. And I think we now live in a very interesting juncture because we're quite close to being able to create real thinking machines. And once you get something much smarter than us, it's very likely going to be more powerful than us. So we're right on the cusp of being either happier and more fulfilled than we ever imagined was possible before, or being victim to dystopic scenarios of our own creation, right? And the choice point, it really comes down to what's the compassion level, what's the ethical orientation, what's the the depth of heart and understanding of the AGIs that we create. So this is really the most important matter that humanity has ever faced since we evolved into humanity out of the great ape-like creatures that we were not too long ago. And I mean, this matter of what's the orientation of AGI systems toward humans, animals, the ecosystem of Earth, sentient beings in general, what's the level of compassion of the AGIs we create? This is something that, it's risen in importance in my mind as I've matured as a human being, and also as I've gotten a clearer and clearer understanding that, like, wow, we may really be able to create AGIs fairly soon. When I started out working on trying to build AGI systems, I was a teenager, and it was mostly the intellectual challenge and the cool value, right? It was like, well, this is the most amazing thing I could imagine doing, is creating a super intelligent mind. And wouldn't it be amazing to understand the mind well enough to create one, right? Then as I got older and older, I got more a sense that humanity is perhaps getting itself into a corner that has no good way out besides the creation of powerful, like highly beneficial and positive, loving AGI systems. I mean, we're creating more and more powerful technologies so that fewer and fewer people with less and less resources and less technical savvy and intelligence can cause more and more damage, right? And if you're getting more and more powerful technologies that make it easier for people to cause damage, then what can you do? I mean, you can try to put in sort of a fascist control regime to stop people from causing damage, but this is probably doesn't work, and it's also unethical, unaesthetic, and really nasty. But it's hard to put these technologies back in the bottle. But can we really trust human organized political systems to be efficient and non-corrupt enough to manage more and more and more powerful technologies, which have tremendous potential for good, but also tremendous potential for destruction? Looking at the way the world is run right now by our political and business institutions, it's hard to have faith in these institutions to manage these exponentially more and more powerful technologies. One quickly comes to the conclusion that humans are going to need a helping hand, and that having beneficial, compassionate AGI systems is really the most promising way for humanity to save the day and turn the complex, difficult situation that we see in the world today into something that's amazingly positive, and perhaps even utopic for human beings and for whatever other beings humans create, discover, or evolve into. And so, yeah, I want to talk a bit now about how I see the issue of AGI ethics. And this this is an increasingly popular topic. A lot of what's said about it I don't necessarily agree with. I think some people worry about it too much and some people worry about it too little, but I do think it's a very serious topic that needs to be interwoven into all of our work on building and rolling out general intelligence. I mean, I think Nick Bostrom, who I know and respect fairly well, wrote a book, Superintelligence, where he argued basically that superhuman AGIs are extremely likely to want to get rid of all humans while pursuing their own instrumental goals. And I think that's a wild overstatement. I mean, I think what Nick showed in his book, if anything, is that we can't convincingly disprove the hypothesis that superintelligences will want to annihilate everyone, because we don't have any basis for solid knowledge about superintelligences. I mean, if his argument is we don't know what a superintelligence is going to do with any solidity, so there's no way we can prove it won't want to kill all humans. I mean, we can't refute that. But I don't think he made a compelling argument that there's a high probability superintelligence will want to annihilate humans. That he if you parse out the arguments in his book, he didn't show that. We have no reason to believe there's a high probability of something bad happening. On the other hand, Ray Kurzweil, good friend of mine who I also respect tremendously, Ray, in his books and speeches anyway, seems to basically assume everything will come out for the best, and that, you know, society will figure out how to, you know, selectively relinquish technologies that are maximally dangerous, allow technologies that do good, and then everything will be for the best in this amazing singularitarian world. And I think, you know, I'm an optimist too, so I can appreciate the fact that Ray is an optimist by nature, and he's accentuating the positive partly as a way to help make the positive happen. All that's great, but I worry that sometimes he doesn't take quite seriously enough the gravity of the risk of a non-compassionate AGI. I mean, I think we can make compassionate, loving, ethical, beneficial AGIs. We can do it. It's not impossible. It's not guaranteed that an AGI will be malevolent or indifferent to humans or other sentient beings. On the other hand, I think we have to make, it's a reasonable hypothesis anyway. There's certainly a non-trivial odds that we really have to make an effort to make our AGIs beneficial, compassionate, loving, and helpful. Then the worry to me is that humanity just isn't going to bother because there's other things on its collective mind. Like, supposing we're in a position now where, you know, we could create a beneficial, compassionate, loving AGI, or we could create an AGI which has a twisted and screwy motivational system and understanding of the world. Well, if the twisted, screwy, not that beneficial AGI, you know, will make some people more money or help better with national defense in the short term, it could be that humanity ends up creating these undesirable types of AGIs instead of creating the more beneficial and compassionate type of AGI. And that's a sort of scenario that really worries me, which leads up to my current work with SingularityNET and decentralized AI, among other points. So yeah, let me share my screen once more and go through some points related to AGI ethics a little more systematically. So I've titled this portion of this talk, this video series, a Developmental AGI Ethics. And that's because I think AGI ethics is something that has to develop in a natural sort of way over time. We don't know what it's going to develop into. And also, the code that we supply to the AGI initially is important, but not the only important thing. What's equally important is the interactions and the experience that we supply to the AI, so it can develop its own ethical understanding as it learns and grows along with human beings. So, you know, I think, just to state out the goal of developmental AGI ethics in a sort of loose and approximate but reasonably thought out way, we want to create AGIs that respect human life, ethics, culture, and history, that have compassion for humans and other sentient beings, and that also are thoughtful and deliberative about their own ethical evolution. And I think if you want to do this, what do you need? I mean, you need the right AGI architecture. You need an AGI architecture that is, you know, it's oriented toward deliberative self-control and reflection and self-understanding. And I've explained why I think, you know, an AI system with a metagraph-based knowledge representation is good for self-reflection and self-understanding, because metagraphs are a great model of how intelligent systems work. So if a system is using as its base representation a representational framework that's also great for high-level modeling of intelligent systems like itself, you at least have the I mean, you have the plumbing there to support robust self-reflection, which I think is really important for reflective ethics, something I'll discuss in a few minutes. I think you also need to educate the AGI correctly. I mean, which largely has to do with not just telling the AGI what are the right rules to follow. It has to do with the learning by doing. I mean, you need the AGI to be engaged in beneficial, compassionate actions. It has to be saving the environment. It has to be doing, elder care and education and medical care. It has to be creating artworks that give people joy and making scientific discoveries that enrich people's understanding. If what the AI is learning by doing is how to control killer robots and spy on people to get them in trouble and sell people stuff they don't need, then that's not the right kind of education to create AGIs that have the positive ethical characteristics that we want. And I mean, getting the right AGI education requires rolling out AGIs in the right social and economic context. So all these things need a lot of attention. I mean, I thought a bunch, of course, being a tech geek, I thought about the sort of computer sciencey aspects of creating AGIs that can, reflect on their goals and reflect on their own changes in understanding as they grow, so that they are ongoingly ethical, even as they evolve and develop in radically new ways. And you can think about this sort of preservation of ethics through radical growth in a couple ways. I mean, you can say, we want to start with these 4 goals and be sure that the AGI system that starts with these 4 goals, even if it rewrites its code and improves itself a lot over time, we want to ensure that AGI keeps those 4 goals. So we could say that. We could also say, okay, we're going to start the AGI with these 4 goals, and the AGI will improve and revise and modify itself. And in doing so, we know that it will change something about its goals as it grows, just as humans' goals are not the same as those of chimps. And every one of us has changed our goals and aspirations somewhat as we've matured, developed, and gotten older. But we want the AGI to evolve its goals in a sort of thoughtful, reflective, compassionate way, rather than revising its goals like accidentally and willy-nilly. So you could look at the ethics of growth over time of AGI systems in either of those ways, right? Either in terms of strict goal preservation, or in terms of sort of thoughtful and reflective goal evolution. And there's a certain aesthetic ugliness and certain ethical ugliness to the idea of making a superhuman AGI system keep the same goals that it had when it was merely a human level AGI system. That feels almost like trying to have a human keep an ape's or a dog's goals, even as it goes far beyond an ape or dog intellectually. On the other hand, there's also something scary about a system that is evolving its goals, even if it's doing it, reflectively and compassionately and with great care, because in the end, with its superior intellect, it may figure out how to modify the goals that humans initially thought make sense into something that it reflectively and profoundly thinks are much better. But humans still might not like what its goals thoughtfully and reflectively evolved into, any more than chimps or dogs necessarily like all of human beings' goals that gradually evolved out of like lower mammal goal systems. So this is a challenge that our species is going to face in the coming decades. And I wrote a paper on an architecture for advanced self-modifying AI called the Golem, and there were actually two versions of Golem. One of it has to maintain its initial goals as closely as possible. The other one can evolve its initial goals in a sort of careful, reflective, and purposeful way. And you can take either of those perspectives. And I mean, certainly as we experiment with more and more advanced AGI systems, it's going to be prudent to take the former perspective initially. I mean, the first really advanced AGIs that we build, we would like to build them in a way that their top level goals aren't drifting all the time. We'd like to know that they're pursuing the goals that we initially supplied them with. And that will make sense certainly during the period of initial research and experimentation and first commercial deployment of, human level or near human level AGIs. Whether after getting a sense of that process and getting to know our AGIs better, I mean, whether things then move to more of a dynamic AGI goal evolution framework. I mean, I'm guessing that's what's going to happen, but I'm also happy to leave that decision for the future once we understand more and have some actual AGI systems to study and play with. I mean, what the Golem architecture does is it sort of systematizes the idea of an AGI architecture that it's oriented toward modifying itself, but in a way that's paying constant attention to whether its original goals are still maintained, and if they're not, in what ways aren't they? So the Golem system has a certain operating program, which is the actual AGI system that causes it to do things, and then it has a meta program which can update its operating program. So the operating program, it's a learning system, it's a reasoning system, it's doing stuff. The meta program is in charge of self-improvement and self-modification, and it can upgrade the operating program. And the nature of the Golem architecture is just to be really careful about this meta program. And the meta program is only allowed to upgrade the operating program if, after doing a whole bunch of careful testing, it concludes that said replacement of the operating program will indeed preserve the initially given goals. Or if you're looking at more of a goal evolution-oriented version of Golem, it will only allow the meta program to replace the operating program if it determines that the change of goals implicit in the replacement of the operating program is sufficiently small and sufficiently reasonable and methodical and reflected upon. So I mean, that the crux of this kind of architecture is that you allow meta learning and self-reprogramming, but you split it off into a separate part of the architecture. Whereas in a human mind, I mean, what you find is that fundamental self-modification and self-reprogramming they're just part of what we do, and they're tangled up with everything else, which gives us very little sort of reflective, deliberative control over that process in most normal everyday states of consciousness anyway. Certainly human brain and mind can also go into states of consciousness where self-improvement, self-modification are highly reflective and purposeful, but that's not the way most people are thinking most of the time. In Golem architecture, you split off meta learning, you split off learning of the operating program that controls the system into a separate software process, maybe running on a separate machine, which then has an extremely rigorous testing procedure. And the code for testing modifications to the operating program, we don't necessarily need to be upgrading, modifying it, and improving that, because these are fairly basic testing scripts. Now, of course, we could allow modification and improvement of the testing code that evaluates modifications to the basic operating program running the system. If you do that, you're opening the door to bad things happening. If you're in a goal evolution scenario rather than a strict goal preservation scenario, it may just be fine. So there's a paper I wrote a number of years ago on Golem architecture. You can look at the details. I mean, the big issue with the Golem architecture, of course, is that it's not quite as bad as AXI or Gödel machine that I discussed in an earlier video in this series. But I mean, it's a fairly infeasible architecture to implement in its full form. So I mean, the lesson of the Golem thought experiment is you could build an AGI system that did its AGI stuff and with a high probability preserved its initial goals or evolved its initial goals in a reflective and purposeful way. But it's really, really computationally expensive to build an AGI system that is so super careful about its goal preservation or goal evolution. And then that gives an obvious dilemma, right? I mean, the dilemma it gives you is, I mean, if it takes a huge amount of compute resources to build this AGI, which is very careful at managing its goals and their persistence or evolution, and you can much more cheaply, with much less resources, build a system that escalates its intelligence by self-modifying and self-reflecting in a less carefully calculated way. I mean, which of these is going to get built first? Well, especially if the AGI that's more fast and loose about its own goal evolution is making somebody money or doing good, saving people's lives, making amazing artworks that give people joy. So this is a highly non-trivial challenge, right? And I mean, to meet that challenge, we really need to bring down the computational cost of making Golem type architectures that are careful at goal system management. And we don't have a lot of research on that going on the planet right now. We have a lot more research on advertising and spying and military AI and so forth. And there are organizations like MIRI, Machine Intelligence Research Institute, formerly called Singularity Institute for AI, where I was director of research for a while. And there's Max Tegmark's Future of Life Institute. There's Future of Humanity Institute, Center for Study of Existential Risk. There's Humanity Plus, a futurist nonprofit, of which I'm chairman of the board. So I mean, there's organizations around that are oriented toward sort of thinking about problems in this vicinity, but there's not really a serious technical research thrust on the planet aimed at bringing down the computational cost of implementing AGI systems in a way that is highly responsible with respect to goal system management. And there certainly should be, compared to other things that say trillions of dollars are spent upon. This is arguably something that's more important. One of the challenges, though, is thinking about that becomes somewhat contingent on how you think AGI is going to be achieved, right? So if AGI was going to be a detailed human brain emulation or a massive conglomeration of current variety deep neural networks, then thinking about how to get a scalable version of an AGI that is responsible at goal system management is one problem, right? And if you think an OpenCog Hyperon type approach with a metagraph knowledge representation, and explicit logical reasoning engine is a key ingredient. If you think that's a likely path to AGI, I mean, then you have a different story and a different path of technical thinking about how to tractably make a real world AGI that's responsible about goal system management. So from my standpoint, as we progress with OpenCog Hyperon and this particular approach to AGI, I think it's important to think about this issue of how do you make a Hyperon system that's Golem-like, but reasonably computationally tractable. And I've had a bunch of technical thoughts on that I won't share now, but it's certainly among the more critical issues facing us as we move forward. So Golem is more on the technical architectural side. I think it's equally important to think about sort of what's the nature of the ethical system of an AGI as it evolves, right? So we can think about ethical development in multiple stages. Stefan Bugai and I wrote a couple papers on this, which I think the gist of them is contained in a chapter in the book Engineering General Intelligence. The earliest stage of ethical development you can think about is what we call pre-ethical. You want to build an empathic system, and we're working on that significantly in Awakening Health and Sophia Dow in the collaboration that my SingularityNET and OpenCog team has with Hanson Robotics. I mean, we have some sorts of basic empathy in those robots now. Like when you look sad, they can emulate that sadness. When you're nodding in agreement, they can emulate that, and you can emulate that behaviorally. You can also, when like joy is perceived in the person the robot is talking to, you can tweak the parameters of the robot's cognitive system so the robot has the patterns corresponding to happiness happening in its AI system, right? So I mean, I think this sort of basic empathy is important. I mean, to what extent these simple AI systems are experiencing empathy becomes another weird philosophy question wrapped up with consciousness issues, like we talked about in the last lecture. But getting the basic pattern of empathy and compassion in there is important. But without some theory of mind, you can only go so far, right? Like if you don't really understand what's going on, if the robot or AI doesn't really understand what's going on with the other beings like humans it's talking to, then its ability to be ethical is quite limited. And this brings us to the next step, what you call conventional ethics. Like when you have a limited theory of mind, like even a 2 or 3-year-old kid has, I mean, then you can understand, like, well, like this is my toy, this is your toy, or there's 4 toys, maybe I should get 2, you should get 2. Okay, these are the rules in this context. Like I use my inside voice here in the house, I use my outside voice out of the house, right? And you can understand, like, well, maybe I shouldn't clobber that guy on the head. Why? Because I don't like being clobbered on the head, and I'm a lot like that guy. I mean, you can tell I have a very energetic 3-year-old son right now, and he's struggling with conventional ethics. Let's say, I mean, he basically gets it, but part of his brain would rather not get it. And it's a good thing that while he's struggling with this stage, he is very small and not that physically powerful, right? So similarly with AGIs, when an AGI is struggling with this stage, you want it not to be incredibly powerful and influential, right? And this gets at one of the differences between narrow AI and AGI development, right? Because I mean, we're building narrow AIs right now that do some very serious things, from assigning credit scores to controlling military robots. Well, I'm not building AIs to control military robots, but others are. I am building AIs that help assess credit scores and that help diagnose, who has cancer and who doesn't. People are building AGIs that drive cars. I'm building AGIs that make robot. People are building narrow AIs that drive cars. I'm I'm working on narrow AI proto AGIs that make robots move around hospitals to serve as nursing assistants, right? I mean, narrow AIs, including those that are trying to incorporate more and more AGI functions, are doing more and more quite serious things. On the other hand, if you want an AGI to really develop a profound and mature sense of ethics, you need that AGI to sort of go through the ethical learning and experimentation stage that a young child does, right? And that may involve clobbering someone on the head a couple times so that you can learn why it's a bad thing to do. So the pathway I think we're going to see is we're going to have narrow AIs that are programmed for narrow but real and valid ethical behavior in the domains that they're operating in, like the awakening health elder care robots that we're building. These are programmed for ethical behavior in an elder care context, and this is a very serious thing we're taking with a lot of care in consultation with medical experts and AI ethicists. On the other hand, we're going to be building experimental AGI systems that are not given serious responsibilities at the early stages of development and are able to play around and try a bunch of different things. And these can be toy robots in a preschool type environment. They can also be, agents playing Minecraft and building and knocking down stuff, right? And these experimental proto AGI agents are able to sort of learn conventional ethics through trial and error like a young kid does. At a certain point, when they learn well enough, you can merge them in with the narrow AI systems, and then you can get systems that are both more generally intelligent and useful at doing things, and combine a practical. So if we want to take the experimental sort of proto AGI systems we've created that are learning their own ethical systems as they learn how to be intelligent, as they model the world in an experimental way, like a young child. If we want to take these and merge them in with the narrow AI systems we're building that have a more rigid sense of ethics as befits the particular domain they're being applied to. If we want to merge these together, what we want is for the more experimental, more fully AGI-ish systems to reach the stage that we're calling mature ethics, right? And this means the system is not only able to behave ethically based on sort of having the right instincts for, say, fairness and sharing, or understanding that someone else may experience a similar thing to you. It means that the system is able to reason and think about its ethical principles and its relationship to a given situation, other people's relationship to that situation, why the ethical principle says what it does in a certain setting. I mean, I'd say a lot of adult humans in the world today don't have an especially mature ethics, like don't try to shape their ethical principles into a coherent system, don't think in a given situation about to what extent are they being selfish, to what extent are they being altruistic, don't identify the ethical sort of quandaries and quagmires that they're stepping through, right? I mean, this is a fairly high bar in terms of ethics. I mean, I would say it's not an insanely high bar, and I know a lot of people who are very, very reflective about what's right and wrong and whether what they're doing is right and wrong according to the criteria that they have in their heads. But maybe a minority of the adult population on the earth, I don't know, but I think that's where we want our AGIs to get to through their own experiential learning and interaction in the world before we want to give them a lot of power, right? So, and when you look at a framework like OpenCog Hyperon, you can build fairly constrained, narrow AI systems using a framework like that. So say once we upgrade our Awakening Health humanoid elder care robots to use OpenCog Hyperon instead of the original legacy OpenCog system, I mean, we're going to constrain what Hyperon can do in those robots initially in accordance with the needs of that application and in accordance with our idea about what's ethical, right, and appropriate to do in an elder care and medical robotics setting. Then, as we experiment with the OpenCog Hyperon based AGI systems in less serious settings, like not delivering medical care to people or doing anything with huge real world impact. Once these more AGI systems get to the stage where they're really able to reflect on what principles they're using in a given situation to choose their actions, then you can do that merger. And what's interesting, of course, is if the sort of narrow AI verging on narrow AGI elder care robot system and the more pure AGI system that's mastered mature self-reflection, if they're both based on the same software framework, like the same distributed atom space, the reasoning using the same logic engine and so forth, then merging them together becomes reasonably tractable as a thing to do. Certainly quite different than if these were two AI systems based on completely different principles. And then we can talk next about an even higher level of ethics. We can think of this as reflective ethics or enlightened ethics, right? Even beyond what you would hope of a sort of advanced self moderating mature adult. I mean, we're talking about like Gandhi tier ethics here, Zen master tier ethics, right? I mean, broad compassion for and empathy with all sentient beings and openness to modifying every single one of one's principles and ideas based on experience, understanding of the illusion of oneself and of everybody else's self, along with compassion for the experiences of these illusory selves, full grasping of the impossibility of moral certainty, yet without falling into nihilism, but rather proceeding systematically with the pursuit of uncertain moral imperatives, including the imperative to increase incrementally and gradually the certainty of one's moral imperatives, right? I mean, this is high end. I aspire to this myself. I can't say that I fully achieve it at all times, and I also think almost nobody does, although certainly some do better than I do. But I also think that this is where we need our AGIs to get to, right? I mean, if we don't build AGIs that are more ethical, more advanced in ethics than reasonably ethically mature adult humans, things may not turn out all that well. And I mean, this is because, you know, AGI systems are going to face many more difficult challenges than human beings face, right? I mean, human society faces the challenge of you know, operating the singularity, which is super hard. Now, AGI systems are going to face that same challenge handed over from us of managing the singularity for humans and for themselves. But they're also facing the challenge of modifying and improving their own minds in a very, you know, free and open way, which we can't do because of the way our brains work. So, I mean, being a self-modifying system in charge of the singularity is a very big moral responsibility. And you know, we need our AGIs to have very advanced ethical systems. These AGIs will be able to learn from all humans once they reach a sufficient level of cognitive advancement, right? So they're gonna see the Zen masters and the popes and priests and saints and the Sufi imams, and read the writings of all the great philosophers and observe how people all over the world interact with each other for better or for ill, so that they will have a huge basis for learning here. They'll also be able to copy themselves in multiple ways and, you know, see how their various copies behave and interact, and they can introspect into their own mind states to understand exactly how the illusion of their own self and will is built up analytically. They can understand all these aspects of their own mind in a way that we can't, because we don't have that sort of introspection into our own brain state. So along with the greater challenges these AGIs will face, they also have great advantages. And, you know, we need to make as sure as we can that as these challenges are faced and these advantages are leveraged, the result is AGI systems have advanced, reflective, and enlightened ethics. And that's certainly what I'm working for. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem that the bulk of the modern AI industry is working in quite the same direction, right? I mean, if you look at like what are the core vertical markets that the modern AI economy is working toward, I've summarized it many times as selling, killing, spying, and crooked gambling, meaning advertising industry, you know, warfare, espionage, and Wall Street, right? I mean, that's pretty much what it is. And that's not everything. There's AI in medical, there's AI in education, there's AI in art and science, but none of those are as big economically as these. And that's not essentially what we want, right? I mean, and this leads on to SingularityNET, the project I founded in 2017 and have been the CEO of since mid 2018. I mean, I think as well as having the right AGI algorithm and system, which I think OpenCog Hyperon is one right AGI algorithm and system, assuming we can evolve and shape it correctly, and as well as bringing an AGI appropriately through the stages of ethical development. I mean, I think it's going to be very important that the AGI is rolled out within the global economy in a benefit and compassion oriented way. So I mean, we want emerging AGIs to be democratically guided and governed. We want a diverse, broad-based swath of humanity to contribute to the AGI, to the code, the algorithm, the knowledge, the goals, the applications. We want the infrastructure underlying the AGI to be decentralized, not controlled by any one party, both because we don't want that one party to you know, run amok and start pursuing selfish goals, and also so no one can go and kill that one party or force them to hand over the keys to the AGI network. The AGI network needs to be massively decentralized for all sorts of safety and responsibility reasons. And we need the education of the AI, the learning by doing, to involve predominantly compassionate and beneficial applications, medicine, education, science, sustainability, the arts, not so much selling, killing, spying, and gambling. I mean, those are going to happen. They have their role to play in the world economy. We're not going to stop them, but they don't need to be the majority, right? And that's what SingularityNET is about in terms of a decentralized blockchain-based infrastructure and tokenomic economy for AGI. I mean, you can see a bunch of talks I've given about that already, so I'm not going to harp on it so much here, but I think it is absolutely instrumental if we want to live beyond the singularity, and setting aside our own selves, if we want the world beyond the singularity to be a loving and compassionate and beneficial one, right? So I mean, I'm often asked what I myself want out of all this. Like, what do I want the world to be like after superhuman AGI is created? And the way I often answer is, I want to have, for my own self personally, I want to have multiple replicate copies of myself. So I'd like to have one that's just a modestly upgraded version of the current meat Ben Goat. So like I can do without like stomach aches and allergies and such. That's fine. But the crux of my humanity would remain roughly as it is, and there's so many amazing things to do in my current human form, right? I mean, there's not so many mountains to climb, musical instruments to master, people to meet and understand, animal languages to learn, human languages to learn, mathematics to go through. Incredible amount of stuff to do. I would also like to gradually, like slowly enough that I can feel it happening, upgrade my intelligence. Let's say double IQ every year, and fuse with whatever superhuman superminds I feel like fusing with once I escalate my intelligence considerably, right? And I think any improved human mind that improves slowly enough to feel itself improving and thus maintain some continuity of self, continuity of identity, any such gradually improving human mind is going to be minimal in general intelligence compared to some engineered general intelligences and what they self modify into. I mean, you're going to have like femtotech or adotech superminds running inside quark gluon plasmas. I mean, you're going to see super intelligent AIs running on physical infrastructures we haven't even imagined yet, and they're going to be able to self-modify and improve themselves in ways that just go much faster than any gradually incrementally improving human mind. And I think that's fine. I mean, I think post-singularity humans aren't going to be the most intelligent thing. Human uploads and derivatives aren't going to be the most intelligent thing, and that's all right. It's stupid to need to be the most intelligent thing. We're going to be explicitly and effectively part of an ecosystem of incredibly diverse intelligences, incredibly diverse, complex self-organizing systems, some of which are massively more generally intelligent than us. And I want to see this incredible ecosystem of mind happen. If it doesn't exist yet in the universe, I want to see it created. If it does exist in the universe, I want our little network of human mind stuff to connect to it, right? Which is sort of what I suspect is going to happen. On the other hand, I am sentimentally, ethically and emotionally attached to this species of, modestly improved apes that we call humanity. And, I have incredibly like 5 human children now, one sweet little granddaughter. And, I have an extended family that I'm close to, all sorts of human friends. I would like to see all these wonderful human beings able to continue and flourish, make as many replica copies as they want, stay legacy human if they want, upgrade if they want. But I don't even though it's important to me to see this incredible superhuman, super intelligent mind network flourish, it's also important to see this happen in a way that fosters growth, love, joy, benefit for humans and the minds in our surround. And I see no reason why we can't have all those things. But we are now living at the time when, we may potentially be the ones making that choice. And I mean, I say that aware that the notion of choice is limited. Many of the choices that we feel like we're making are actually being sort of driven by dynamics that we just don't understand. But I mean, I think in some meaningful sense, we're at the choice point, and we can create AGI in a way that is democratic, decentralized, has developmental ethics based on self-understanding and self-reflection, so that it can then grow into an enlightened and reflective ethics. It brings about a positive singularity, learning by doing education, medicine, science, arts, sustainability, beneficial things. Or on the other side, we can proceed with selling, killing, spying, and gambling, perhaps using architectures that get towards some weird kind of general intelligence without much reflectivity on what they're doing, and without much self-understanding or ethical core. And we can then get some sort of malevolent singularity. Like we're at potentially a choice point between these two sorts of paths. And this now is a lot of what motivates me. I mean, intellectual curiosity certainly is still there. It's a fascinating challenge to create minds, but at this point, like I would set aside that challenge in a heartbeat and focus on other interesting challenges. There's plenty of them out there in life. If I thought that working on AGI was more likely to lead in a bad direction. But as I'm thinking about it now, like the human race is hurtling kind of willy-nilly toward creating AGI systems, and most of the resources going into narrow AI and AGI are not really being deployed in an ethically positive way. So I think it's very important for as many people as possible who understand what AI is about on a technical level to get ethical systems upgraded as close to enlightened ethics as possible, and to exert themselves in as much as possible toward creating AGIs that can evolve their own enlightened ethics. And that's that's deadly serious. I mean, working on AGI is incredibly fun for me. I love it, but I never forget that the stakes are incredibly high. Like if humanity creates AGI wrong, then my 5 kids may all wind up dead before they get the chance to even fully grow up and live out their ordinary human lives. Like I very profoundly do not want that, right? Like I mean, I very profoundly want my kids and me and all humans listening to this to have incredible like joy, growth, choice, and abundance on account of the enlightened AGIs that we create. And I'm optimistic that during the next years, as we make more and more progress toward building AGI, I'm optimistic that more and more of you, more and more of my fellow humans are going to see the wisdom and the imperative necessity of putting more and more of your own efforts toward both uplifting your own self-understanding and ethical dynamics, and helping create AGIs that are as enlightened and helpful as possible. And that is the end of this seemingly endless series of videos on general theory of general intelligence. Thanks for listening. Onward and upward to the singularity and beyond.